Good afternoon. I'd just like to open with a brief story that I encountered earlier this year, and it really resonated with me when I read this case. I was sitting in a cafe in Sydney, and I got a salad, which is unusual for me, and I bit into a lettuce leaf, and I pulled back. It tasted a bit strange, and in the salad was half a caterpillar, me having consumed the other half. And that turned me off salads for a very, very long time. And I never went back to the same cafe. And I'm still very reticent to eat salads. And I think what that story sort of shows is KFC has a lot of work to do in making up trust here. Trust and fixing its internal processes to make sure errors like this do not happen again. And that will be the theme of our presentation today, trust and internal processes. So we found 3 key issues with KFC. And as you can see, we itemize them as the supply chain, and we're going to be talking about how we're going to be reinventing that. Importing, whether we should import chicken from the US, and branding, how we go about restoring this trust in the mind of KFC's consumers. And to deal with this, we've got what we itemize as 3 key solutions here. So we have what we deem to be this co-op Dragonhead enterprise structure. So we want to leverage this existing Dragonhead structure which exists within China, but add a cooperative element to it. And Ryan will be talking about that a little bit later. We don't want to have any increase in US imports, and Ryan will explain that as well. And thirdly, we want to be talking about a premium product line extension. We want to introduce a luxury range of items at KFC, and hopefully couple that with a campaign with an answers website where consumers can ask and have their questions answered about the particular queries that they may have. I'll just run you through a quick agenda of what we'll be covering this morning. Mike will start off after me, and he'll be looking at the situation analysis, the macro environment that the business exists within. After that, Ryan will be talking about the supply chain and improvements that can be made there. He'll also be talking about imports and whether that's a wise decision for KFC. I'll then come in, my name's Michael, and I'll be talking about branding and the way that KFC can restore that trust. And Matthew will wrap up with some financial forecasts and risks that we expect as a result of adopting this strategy. So I'll now hand it over to Mike, who will talk a little bit about the external environment and how KFC can respond to it.
Thank you, Michael. So from looking at this case, it was really clear that there are a number of external pressures put upon KFC. They're facing an incredibly hard battle from multiple fronts here. And if we start off by looking at the pest, we can go through each of the elements of it. What we find in the political landscape is that there's very tight socialist land controls, which means that the farms exist as small family-owned property, and it's unable for them to gather up and grow larger. This means that KFC is in a foreign environment, unlike that in most of the other countries, including its home US base, where it's used to dealing with large suppliers and small numbers. We find that although the government really wants to bring about increased food standards, these small farms mean that it's terribly difficult to regulate, and there is very limited success of them regulating this so far. However, there are the standards, the international standards, the State Food and Drug Administration that are coming in to try and increase the food quality there. If we look at the economic landscape, I mentioned the small family farms, which is an integral part of how the Chinese economy develops. On top of that, they have increasing contractual complexity. That means that the relationship with these farms are getting more and more difficult to manage. But if we look at the chicken production of Chinese farms, in the last 5 years, they have grown by 14%. So you can see that there is really a demand drive of chicken in China. And in fact, if we look at the social element, on the last one there is a massive increasing demand for meat in China, especially from the growing middle class. And the Chinese middle class prefer chicken to beef. So on growing on this, KFC has managed to be quite successful. In fact, they have built over 50% of their global revenues on the Chinese market. However, also bundled with that is the increasing health and food concerns of the Chinese consumer, who are facing with the difficulties of health standards that they combat all the time. And there's a number of media scares that are related to KFC, including the one with the instant chicken, bird flu, the genetic engineering scandal, and so on. So if we have a quick look at the technological side, the advances in food production and technology, it could be great for KFC. Unfortunately, it is being used against them because this is the root of all the scandals. The antibiotics, the hormones, the genetic engineering, and so on. And that's the second element. They have to deal with all this increasing pressure that these technologies are available for to be used and to be exploited. However, on top of that, there is a large increase in the technological capacity of managing supply chains and managing large distributions. And we'll be using that element later on. So if we summarize, there are four main external pressures put upon KFC, which is the difficult to regulate, the public health outcry. In fact, 80% initially after the scandal said they would not eat at KFC again. The international standards that are making sure that they comply with these, and then the negative use, the negative perception of these farm technologies. So as a result of this, KFC has suffered quite extensively. In 2013, their same-store performance dropped by 37% in the last quarter due to these scandals. And in fact, the global head conglomerate, Yum, their revenues fell by 6% as a result of these effects to KFC in China. And their stock prices fell by 11% over that quarter. So if we look at this, the opportunities and threats are placed out there. They have to deal with this lack of brand trust. They have to deal with this growing resentment of foreign fast foods. And what they have to work with is that they have been able to successfully localize their fast food business to the Chinese market, and they do have a global supply chain and quality standards set up as part of their Star Audit program. However, they have to deal with that they do not have sufficient control over the local chicken supplies at the moment, and their slow response to the 2012 scandal was probably not the best move there. So I'll now pass it on to Ryan to elaborate on how we can build upon these in our strategies.
Thanks, Mike. So before I go into this the solution proposed here in terms of restructuring the relationship between farms, processors, and KFC, I think it's important to elucidate as to what actually occurs when KFC buys chicken, because it has operated quite a unique structure within China. Now, due to legislative restrictions on the purchase and transfer of land, farmers do not have the capacity to sell their land directly. So whereas in the United States, if KFC wanted to expand their production, they would simply buy the farms itself and operate that. But due to these legislative restrictions, what has arisen in China is this Dragon Head enterprise that we talked about, whereby there is a processor company that connects with individual farms, supplies them with feed, chicken, and most importantly, with medicine and antibiotics, and in exchange, the chicken flow comes back up to the processor, who then deals with KFC directly. Now, historically, the pricing structure of this relationship has been a pure price to quantity, whereby the farmers have it's essentially a long call option, where the farmers have a contract price that they agree upon with their processors. However, if the market price goes up and exceeds this contract price, historically there was no implications if they reneged on that contract, sold at market price, and then came back to the processors. So that raises a lot of complications for the processors themselves, which means that their profits and their continuity is based on fluctuations in the price of chicken. So what happened as a result of this? We saw this development whereby processors, in terms of the organizational and a contractual basis. Now, on an organizational basis, farms themselves started to come together to form cooperatives to increase the power of the farmers. But more interestingly, there's a contractual relationship between the processor and the farmers, where they increase the burden of these contracts. So they were then the sole providers of chicken and feed and medicine, right? So this was an ongoing fee that they used to charge in an attempt to mitigate the risk of a farmer reneging on their contract and they losing their revenue stream. So what happened as a result of this? As KFC went directly with these processors, we saw a rise in forging of quarantine qualifications, We saw a rise in the fabricated feeding laws, and we saw increased antibiotics and growth hormone use with the rise of this new contractual arrangement. Now, as Mike has detailed, this had significant implications for both KFC and their partner organisation. So the issue that we turn ourselves is, how can we change this incentive structure? How can we change this relationship between the farms, between the farmers, and between the processors and KFC itself? And this is where we came up with our cooperative solution. This is divided into three main sections. The first one is, we suggest that KFC invests in the processors themselves. Now, we've seen that KFC has asked, with the STAR audit and such measures, for them to audit their books and to show the methods that they have been using to regulate chicken. But as we've seen, that has failed miserably. So we no longer trust the processors to do it themselves. We believe that if KFC is going to come forth and say, we are going to be a leader in this, we're going to rectify this issue, they have to commit wholeheartedly. And we believe the only breakpoint in this stage is the processors. Now, as for the issue between the farmers and the partners themselves, we want to enter into a cooperative relationship where KFC owns half of the processing organisation, and we enter into a cooperative relationship with the farmers themselves. Now, this has happened, but on a small scale in China, and we believe, and as the facts tell us, that having this joint ownership increased motivation of farmers, and it increased their relationship with the processors themselves. Now, the final one, as we are partnering with our farmers, we're going to scrap this contractual arrangement. We're going to scrap the idea, because there's no point. There's no point in having a contract where a farmer can renege it and charge market price. Getting rid of this option, and we are paying them based on fluctuations in market price, because we feel it wastes everyone's time doing it any other way. But what we want to do is, because with KFC's internal finance department, we're going to take the hedging process of the chicken price ourselves, rather than riding on a conglomerate of processors who we don't believe have the structural qualifications to hedge such a complex financial product. So this is our key change that we want to make to our supply process. And what we believe this will do is show to the world that KFC is committed to improving quality. The KFC is committed to changing this core issue that has been plaguing them for now. And we're going to say, we don't need, as I'll show in the next slide, we argue that as a result of this, we don't need to import from the US. Because importing from the US is a recognition that we can't do it in China. And we don't believe that's the message we want to sell, because if we begin to import from US, who stops a consumer from going, yeah, I would like my bucket of chicken, but please make sure it's US chicken because I don't trust the China one. Clearly, if you can't do it here, why am I going to eat anything else? We believe that through this regulatory change, through this internal and this commitment change, we believe that KFC can improve their control environments, not rely on US imports, and increase both their commitment and the brand image of KFC itself. I now pass on to Michael, who's going to discuss some of the branding strategies that accompany this technical approach.
Thanks, Ryan. So Ryan's really honed home how a lot of this change is an internal process. It's about quality control and how that's going to be facilitated. We now move to the external consideration about what KFC's consumers think about KFC chicken and think about quality with KFC chicken. So as we plotted on this perceptual map that outlines price and quality of KFC chicken over the years, we can see in 1987 there was a solid relationship between price and quality. So people were happy with consuming KFC chicken because it was a Western good which was supposed to be superior. Although in 2012, in the midst of this genetic chicken crisis, we saw the shift in quality go far to the left there, because people didn't trust chicken anymore. As Mike said, 80% of KFC consumers saw that there was some sort of risk in consuming the chicken for their health. And we saw that in 2013, with a half-price bucket offer, that didn't really improve the situation for quality. All it did was drop the price, lead to a very short-term increase in revenues, and the rest of the month turned out in a loss. So where we want KFC to be in 2015 and 2016 is to the right of our 1987 spot in terms of quality and upwards in terms of price. As this next slide will show you, there are 4 ways in marketing that we can change a brand, and that's product, price, place, and promotion. And for KFC, arguably the ones that are most important are price and promotion. So with price, we'll be looking at a system where we introduce a second food option. And this second food option is all about having a premium range of chicken. And that premium range is designed to inspire people to think differently about KFC chicken and associate KFC chicken with luxury. And that's what this relationship with price will do. The second element is to do with promotion. And we know that KFC's made some significant inroads so far with social media. and they've done a lot with Weibo and a lot with microblogging. But what they've really lacked is having a venue and a forum that they can control. And that's what we think this microsite will do. McDonald's did it in Australia a couple of years ago. They created a microsite where consumers could ask questions about the products. Like, is there chicken feet in the chicken nuggets? Does the tail of the cow go into beef burgers? And it's a forum where McDonald's can openly answer questions, but they control the forum. They can take down questions they don't like, and they control the space, which is very powerful from a branding perspective. And as we know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we don't control this physiological need about safety, then consumers are going to back away from the chicken. I'll keep coming back to this 80% statistic that Mike referenced. If 80% of your consumers feel unsafe about eating your product, you need to go back to basics and address these physiological needs. I'll now hand it over to Matthew, who will talk a little bit about financial modelling and our risks.
So what we saw from the analysis of where KFC was coming from with their new strategy, that there would be certain risks that we would need to overcome, certain risks that would plague us in perhaps the beginning of our new venture to start off a new cooperation with both processors and farmers. And the majority of the risks would come from the initial farmer cooperation. Why would they want to change what they've been doing for so many years, know what they do best, and change the way that they operate under a new model that we would propose here at KFC? And there are two main reasons that we see how to get over this risk. It's the idea that we want the farmer to be more secure. We really want the farmer to feel comfortable in the relationship with KFC, and that they're able to be delivering good quality products that we won't refuse, that we will entirely sell to our customer, and ones that we can be proud to serve on our table. And we would do this by ensuring that we stick with farmers that produce over 2,000 chickens per quantity that we order. Because we feel that in any perceived version of quality, a farm that produces less chickens has less scalability and might perceive to be less quality, less health conscious, more anabolic steroids going into these chickens, and we feel that that would be something that we try to avoid. The other thing that we'll do for farmers is provide them with a stable contract, something where they'll be able to be ensured that their product will be purchased, that we're removing the middleman who takes a certain cut, who determines whether they get the right amounts of antibiotics for their chickens or the right amount of dollars per pound of chicken. And in reality, we want to see that they get a stable contract by removing this middleman and enjoying with a cooperative behavior with our processes that we will own, where we can maintain product management and quality management. We also see consumer reactions. We can also see the idea of creating a quality product might produce consumers to think that the original product that we used to sell is now inferior or of worse quality. And we feel that that's a risk that we might see at the initial stages, but we feel that it's not something that we'll perceive and be prolonged in the long term. We know that if we create a luxury good, we'll create two markets, and ones that will force better competitive behavior, better regulation, and it will entirely raise the benchmark for the chicken that we sell across all of our product range. And we feel that that's a very important key for KFC. And thirdly is the competitor response. We obviously know that if we're going to release a high premium quality product, one that's more expensive and a higher quality, we will see competitors such as the smaller chains that are now growing locally during our current lacking in profit growth, and also with the already established foreign fast food chains such as McDonald's, who are also in the market and nibbling away at our toes as this continues. But we feel that that'll force them into other competitive responses, other ways that'll build up this fast food market segment, and won't actually expose us to a lot of direct competition, but instead will raise the amount of market share for us to compete within. And that takes us to the timeline. We really want to see how this can operate over time. And in the short term, we want to see 15% of farmer cooperation to do with our new proposed structure. Over the 3 years in the medium term, we want to really see 60% of existing farmers producing over 2,000 chickens per quarter per order to be working with us alongside us in a more competitive, a more stable contract. And hopefully in 5 years, we want to see 100% of all of them working towards with us. And so, in summary, what we saw was a decline in quality with KFC chicken. We saw a decline in their ability to compete within the market when they were doing it tough for very external reasons. And we see that these reasons are really going to be combated by the way that we really revitalize our internal structure, by creating a structure that is not price sensitive to the farmer, but instead is more controlling, more secure, more safe for the farmer to be able to deliver us the chicken that we need to give to our customers. We also don't want to have any more imports from the United States. We feel that if we can control what's going on internally, we'll be able to mitigate any reason why we'd need to create any more forces from Chinese imports of chicken. And also we want to increase our brand. We want to produce our image and be a lot stronger for the future. Thanks very much.
Can I start with a question? Actually, it's probably something I missed. I think in the second last speaker, you mentioned the need to deal with the physiological problem. And if I have basically if I'm stung once, I would not never come back. What's your answer to that?
That's a good question. I think when people have a physiological problem, so are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the series of problems?
Yeah.
So the bottom level, the most basic needs that people need to have satisfied, and particularly with consumer behavior, is this physiological stage. And one of the elements of the physiological stage is safety. And if people don't feel safe about the food that they want to eat, then I think KFC has a massive problem. So that's what the branding campaign was about, was to try and calm people down about that safety concern and get them to trust the KFC brand again.
Congratulations, very good presentation. What I liked about the presentation is, you focus on the bigger picture, and that was really good, and I think that engaged people. But what some of the targets I felt was, pretty aggressive. In 5 years you're going to get every farm to do what you want them to do. I find in China that would be quite an ambitious target, but nevertheless, you focus on a lot of what you want to do, and that's great. To reach all your targets, I'd just like to see, for example, how would you engage, say, the government to do this? I'd like to hear more about that. In perhaps, I appreciate you only had a limited number of time to do this, but just in your mind, what would you?
I can try and step in with a caveat that this is our second day in China, in Hong Kong. So, my understanding of reading this company and farmer partnership was that the government had a strict restriction on buying, selling, and transfer of land. But in terms of the corporations themselves, it seems like over time they have, I know there was a legislative amendment in 1978 which changed the relationship that farmers could have, where they could have these cooperatives and so on and so forth. So my reading of that was that these structures already existed. These structures already existed, but it's a fragmented market. It's a market where KFC hasn't previously dealt in, and on the facts, there's no kind of processor, us, that has kind of linked these supply chains. So in terms of engaging with the government, my understanding was that post that regulatory change in 1978, it was simply a matter of collecting these processors and bringing them under the KFC brand, rather than having to go to the government directly to appeal, say, a change in this legislation. So that was kind of the timeline that we had.
Thank you.
As for the targets, just to touch on that, we agree they are aggressive, and without very limited understanding of the idiosyncrasies of Chinese relationship, because we had a bit of a debate about this in the room, and we thought that in reality KFC is in a pretty dire state at the moment. This has had a significant impact, and if this doesn't resolve soon, we're not sure if it can recover from this. So we strove for these aggressive targets, recognizing they may be perhaps a bit too aggressive, just to relay the kind of the aggressiveness of what we feel that needs to happen to recover from this really dire kind of situation.
I might just add in that 100% target. So the 30, the 60, and the 100% targets were as a percentage of KFC's supply chain, and not all chicken producers in China.
Yeah.
I have no plans for Chinese domination. I'm just sort of clear that.
Thank you.
And just maybe to go a little bit further with engaging the government, it should also be well noted to the audience that obviously there are no current regulations for what the processors do and do not do in terms of assessing the chicken that gets given away to KFC and what KFC use subsequently. And so what our program is trying to initiate was perhaps the perceived Western good that is KFC that is now exploded on Chinese shores obviously came under a US model with US regulations and US health regulations. I think that was taken well for granted here in China, and the processors who obviously wanted to engage in a part of that cut, a part of that service fee, then if there was no framework, there were no formal institutions, then I think by all means that was bound to happen. But what we want to do with our framework here is really engage and remove that person who tells the farmer that you only get 2,000 chickens this year, you only get X amount of antibiotics, you only get Y amount of grain. We want to keep that under our control. Whereas if we're going to operate under the KFC model, we obviously want to take and really improve and drive upon what the US have done, and try to model that here in just terms of the way that we monitor these processes and how the chicken gets sold as an end product, and to engage both the processors owned by us, and we own the processors and the health management, to then cooperate well with the farmers themselves. That's how we see government regulations starting to be play a more important role, because obviously it is very important for everybody to eat healthy and not get sick, and obviously we would like to see government sort of contribution to that area. But I feel that once the processors are removed and under our control, then maybe there can be more communication between the channels.
Mike, would you like to answer as well? All right. You sure?
I think they've provided insufficient.
Okay, all right. Now, I think you guys did well in your presentation, every one of you. Good use of charts, tools, and all the models. Even though I don't know the Maslow chart, you need to explain that actually. But the rest of it, the SWOT analysis, is pretty good. Now you show a chart where you show price and quality, where in 2012 your whey quality is not good and the price is down here, right? And you move to a pretty aggressive point, as in the quality improvement and the price. You didn't elaborate on how to really get there other than a bit of promotion. Very quickly, you skip that page. So I'd like to understand more on how you get from this point to there. That's a very good result if you could achieve that.
I think, yeah, it's a fairly optimistic target, and I'm glad you asked that question. I think the way that KFC was going to move to that higher point on the quality spectrum was primarily through price. So on that graph, we saw an increase in price. And that average price came about as a result of this premium product range that was being brought out. So in KFC, we would have the standard menu options, and then we would have the addition of these slightly higher quality menu options as well. And we think that in the mind of the consumer, that the relationship between price and quality will hopefully translate over to KFC's regular range of goods as well. And that sort of transition to a higher quality perception will hopefully be backed by the promotion campaign that KFC is already running, and the introduction of the micro site that we're hoping to introduce.
Okay, right. Now I think that chart is very flat. It's only price and quality. If you increase the price, what about the revenue in total, or the number of pieces of chicken that you're going to sell?
Yeah.
It's probably going to go down if you increase the price. I think they're price sensitive.
Yeah, that's. I think it's. We agree that. We discussed this. Perhaps this would cannibalize
You
our
did,
existing
okay.
market, but we also then admitted that there's probably not much market to cannibalize at the moment. It's a pretty dire situation. So it's important to note that is average price. So we're not saying that all of our price of our goods are increasing for that amount. It's that we're maintaining the price of our existing product line, but the average price charge is going to increase by this quality product. So we're not saying that across the line we're going to increase price as we go up. That's the average price of the goods that we charge.
And also, the chart is really talking about the perception of the price and the quality. So how does the consumer perceive KFC's price and quality? And at the moment, it's probably below what it should be because of these scandals. As the figures before indicated, the figures for before the scandal, they were all right, but then they took a massive hit from the scandals that KFC went through. So it's about pushing it back up to that level and pushing it a bit beyond that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking at what happened. What do you think KFC's biggest mistake was when dealing with this problem?
I think here, reading the facts is that, one, there's the obvious one in that they delayed their response to this problem. And I think their biggest mistake was underestimating the impact that this would have. think as these warnings came through, it landed on somebody's desk. They looked at it and they go, oh God, there's a bit of hormones in someone's chicken. I'll deal with it tomorrow. Without realizing that by ignoring this and from having like one piece of chicken damaging the reputation of your entire product line was huge. And so I think their big mistake was underestimating the severity of this issue, not acting immediately, not coming out full guns blazing saying we are going to fix this straight away. And there was the perfect example of this was the chairman's letter, who came through, quite lackadaisical, didn't really show some real concern with what had gone through, and consumers responded accordingly. They said, this is an issue. We care about not dying from hormone chickens. So if you're not going to take us seriously, then how can we trust your brand? And why can't I just go to one of these new competitors that are popping up around us? So I think that's probably the biggest.
I want to go a little bit deeper.
Okay.
So the question is, when do you think the management saw the hormone as a problem? Now, the reason I'm asking is, I noticed that in the end of the day, the regulator did not penalize them.
Yeah.
And I think in the material it says legally they've done nothing wrong. So do you think they are kind of falling back to the kind of reliance on law rather than reputation?
Yeah, I think as Matt touched upon, we came here with this perception that we are of a certain quality, whilst the processors were relying on perhaps the quality standards that were imposed by the law at the time. And so you've got this perceived of the quite strict American regulations which came through, and people bought assuming that had translated over here, but they had fallen back on what was legally required. But whilst they were not legally, I'd say that the damages it's had from a consumer's not purchase far outweighs any fine that a government could have imposed. So I think, as Michael said it when we were in the room, that people have spoken with their feet. It doesn't if they got charged $2 million, they have had decreasing store revenue every year for the past 10 years. I think that speaks for itself.
Just as a point of sharing, coming from a bank,
Yeah.
This is the kind of problem we are facing with every day now.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? Actually, it's a question I asked the other team as well. What part of the case do you find the most challenging to analyze and to come up with a solution?
Okay.
Well, personally, I found it's interesting looking at the context of particular cases, and I think coming from Australia, we might have struggled a little bit initially about sort of understanding the Chinese market and the Chinese market for fast food, and it was difficult not to make assumptions about the Chinese consumer that we would think that would happen to Australian consumers. So I think sort of trying to place ourselves in the mind of a Chinese consumer in a Chinese business context was probably the most challenging part for me personally.
I'd say we had to sit down for a good 15 minutes just trying to figure out this whole process of chicken relationship with the organizer. So, we first sat down and I read this and I was going, okay, we're going through, they need it, all right, we'll buy the farms. And then I see this clause, and I go, no, we can't do that. So I was really just sitting down and nutting out this relationship, and then when the co-ops came in, and so that was a bit of a mind bed at wrapping our heads around that.
And the fact that there were so many elements to this, that they were under assault from all these factors at once, that there were these legal elements, these political, social elements, all wrapped together to mean that whatever we came with had to meet all the concerns that had been raised. So it's fulfilling those.
And I think to topple that off was the idea that having one mistake and let that fly through your desk or your inbox ignored, and then have a series of unfortunate events that were just completely unexpected, absolutely destroy what you'd spent 50 years creating in China was actually kind of a scary thought. And trying to get our heads around that was
And I echo that because I'm from risk management.
Okay.
So the biggest risk is always not recognizing a problem as a problem.
and just letting that fly through, and you have to deal with it later. It's a scary thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have my background is I'm business development.
Yes.
So it comes across you guys could probably sell pretty well. Just interested in your premium product. Do you honestly think that's a good idea to introduce a premium product in a fast food chain when it's price sensitive?
Yeah. I think initially, like on the facts, people would probably say no. Coming from Australia, I guess we drew from McDonald's introduced a premium range 3 years ago, the selections menu, and it was offered at sort of 30 or 40% higher than the regular menu items. And we found that drew a lot of families back to McDonald's who sort of saw it as a lower class food offering. So we thought that perhaps in an attempt to lift the quality of KFC and the perception of quality, that adopting a similar tactic in the Chinese market might be worth trying.
Time is up.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you.